Good day, everyone. We are the Group 1. Our topic is about the global divides, the North and the South. So, before we begin, this is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material. So, my topic is about the global divide. So, the global divide is often referred to as the global of North and South divide or global inequality. And it has developed over centuries and is rooted in the historical, economic, political, and social factors. So, here are some key factors to contributing to the development of the global divide. So, first is the colonialism. So the European colonialism played a significant role in shaping the global landscape. So the European powers established colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, exploiting resources and creating economic systems that benefit the colonizers at the expense of the colonies. So this laid the groundwork for economic disparities that persist today. So next is the imperialism. So the era of imperialism that followed colonialism evolved powerful nations extending their influence and control over weaker nations. So this further entrenched economic and political inequalities. The next is unequal distribution of resource. So the world's natural resources are not evenly distributed, leading to disparities in wealth and development. So some regions are rich in natural resources while others lack them. So this has led to economic imbalance and dependency. Then next is the trade imbalances. So historical and contemporary trade relationships have often favored the more developed nations. So unfair trade practices such as unequal tariff structures and trade agreements have disadvantaged developing countries, hindering their economic growth. Then next is the debt and structural adjustment programs. So many developing nations have been burdened with high level of debt. So by the mean of debt is like sa kwarta, then often incurred during times of economic crisis. So international finance institutions such as the International Monetary Fund or the IMF and World Bank have imposed structural adjustments programs that in some cases exacerbated economic inequalities. So next is the political instability. So political instability and conflict in some regions have hindered economic development. Wars, corruption, and weak governance can lead to the mismanagement of resources and hinder investment and growth. The next is the technological disparities. So the gap in technological development between the global and North and South have widened over time. Access to and control over technology can significantly impact economic and social development. Next is the globalization. So, while globalization has the potential to connect economies and foster development, it has also led to the concentration of wealth and power in certain regions. So, multinational corporations often exploit cheaper labor and resources in developing countries, so contributing to the global divide. Then next is the educational disparities. So inequality of access to education is a critical factor in perpetuating global inequalities. So limited educational opportunities in developing countries can hinder human capital development and also the economic progress. Then Next is the health disparities. So, disparities in healthcare access and outcomes contribute to the global divide. So, developing nations often face challenges in providing adequate healthcare infrastructure, leading to poorer health outcomes. So, ang Meaning, North and South divide is addressing this is kind of requires concentrated efforts in international cooperation. So, plant fair trade policies, debt and relief sustainable development, and social justice initiatives. So, to create more equitable and inclusive global system. So, that is all.
So our topic is all about the North and South divided. So here the history of the North and South divide is a socio-economic and political division of Earth popularized in the late 20th century and early 21st century. So the idea of categorizing countries began during the Cold War with the classifications of East and West. So, brand line is a visual depiction of the North and South divide proposed by West German for former Chancellor Willy Brandt in the 1980s. It encircles the world latitude of approximately 30th north, passing east-west, climbing north over China, Mongolia, but dipping south as to include Australia and New Zealand and reach north. So we have a division basis. Being categorized a part of North implies a development opposed to belongings into the South, which implies the lack of theory. So the North becomes synonymous with economic development and industrialization, while the South represents the previously colonized countries, which are in need of help in the form of international aid agents. So, economic development refers to the advancement in the technology, a transition from an economy based largely on agriculture on base one of industry and improvement of living standard. So we have here what includes North and South. So includes North and South generally definition of global North include the Group 8 countries, the United States, Canada, all member states of the European Union, Israel, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, as well as Australia and New Zealand, and 4 of the 5 permanent members of United Nations Security Council and excluding China. So the Global South is made up of Africa, Latin America, and developing Asia, including the Middle East, which is Europe, no, and home and this to the BRIC. So countries like excluding Russia, Brazil, India, and China, which along with Indonesia are the largest southern states. So what are the challenges to North and South divide? So differences is the difference. First is differences. So differences in the political and demographical makeup of countries tend to complicate the idea of monolithic South. Next is globalization. Globalization has also challenged the motion of two distinct economic spheres following the liberalization of post-Mao China initiated in 1978. Regional cooperation between the national economics of Asia has led to the growing and decentralization of the North and the main economic power. Next is recent growth. Bottom of 60 nations, the global South were thought to be gaining on the North in the terms of income, diversification, and participation in the world market. So what are the future of the North and South divide? So economics, as I have argued, international free trade and unhindered capital flows across could lead to a construction in the North-South divide. As some of the countries in the South experience rapid development, there is evidence that the Those states are developing high levels of South aid, for example, Bangladesh, Malaysia, and India, and etc. So, move towards equality. The United Nations has also established a role in this, diminishing the divide between North and South through the Millennium Development Goals, all of which were achieved by 2050. That's all.
Hello everyone, I'm Kadit Saison, and why the global divides the North and the South? So, in the 1920s, the Brent line was developed as a way of showing that how the world was geographically into re- relatively richer and proper nations according to this model. And richer countries as almost all located the north, ang kanang mga dato kasagaran dato nga countries is malocate sila sa north, and with that expect of Australia and New Zealand, so mao na example. And ang pinaka poor nga countries are mostly located in tropical regions in the southern hemisphere. And then why the global divides the north and the south? So the idea of categorizing countries by their economic and developmental status began during the Cold War with the classifications of East and West. So about ang na. And the Soviet Union and China represented the East, and the United States and their allies represented of the West. So the term the third world came into parlance in the second half of the 20th century. It organized in 1952. Article by Alfred Savi entitled The Truce Mondes Union Plenty Early Definitions of the Third World emphasize its exclusion from the East and West conflict that Cold War as well, exceptional status probably of the peoples it combined. So mauna. And then why the global? So despite very significant development gains globally, which have raised many millions of people out of absolutely poverty, there is substantial evidence that inequality between the world richest and the poor, and the poorest countries in a widening in 1820 at Western Europe. Per capita income was almost 3 times bigger than the addition in 2013 Oxfam reported at the nations. So mao to. And what is meant by global north when did north and south divided? So what do we mean when we talk about the global north and south? The global north includes the richest countries that have the most updated technologies and resources, whilst the global south are countries that usually have less resources and money, so therefore their citizens are more likely suffer from poverty. So mao to ang example ana kay Philippines o ang kanang Amerika, kay ang Amerika kay mas updated nilang technologies compare sa ato. And then the north represent the rich and the south. So mao to balik lang. So most of the often is the north is America, Australia, European countries are taken as the global north, whereas the south is done like South America, Asia, Middle East, and African countries are so said to be global south. So that's all. Thank you.
Why the global divides the north and the south? Today, the world is much more complex than the broad line defects, as many poor countries have experienced significant economic and social development. However, inequality within countries has also been growing and some commentators now talk of a global north and global south, referring the respectively to richer, poorer countries, which are found both within and between countries. For example, Greece, India is still home to the largest concentration of the poor people in a single nation. It also has a very sizable middle class and very rich elite. Then, there are many causes of this inequality, including the unavailability of natural resources, then different levels of health and education, the nature of a country's economy and its industrial sectors, international trading policies, and access to markets like global trading. Then, um, how how countries are governed, an international relationship between countries, conflict within and between countries, and countries there are vulnerability to natural hazard and climate change. That's the purpose from the global divides the north and the south.
So good day. The terms Third World and Global South both refer to regions that are generally characterized by lower levels of economic development compared to industrialized nations. But they have different historical and geopolitical connotations. So, parehas ra silang meaning pero naa sila'y lahi-lahi na backgrounds. So first, the Third World. So this term originated during the Cold War era to describe countries that were not aligned with either the Western Bloc or the First World, or the Eastern Bloc, the Second World. Third World countries were often newly independent former colonies, with economies that were primarily agrarian or resource-based. The term carried with it implications of economic underdevelopment, political instability, and social challenges. So, on the other hand, Global South, the term Global South emerged as a more politically correct and geographically inclusive alternative to Third World. It encompasses countries primarily located in the southern hemisphere, but also includes regions in the northern hemisphere that share similar socio-economic characteristics. The Global South concept acknowledges the historical legacies of colonialism, imperialism, and exploitation that have contributed to the economic disparities between nations. So, in summary, while both terms broadly refer to less economically developed regions of the world, Third World has Cold War era connotations and is more associated with political alignment. So while Global South is a more contemporary and inclusive term that emphasizes shared experiences and economic and social challenges across various regions. So, good day. The terms Third World and Global South both refer to the regions that are generally characterized by lower levels of economic development compared to industrialized nations, but they have different historical and geopolitical connotations. So, lahi silang meaning, but lahi ang ilang backgrounds. So first, Third World. This term originated during the Cold War era to describe countries that were not aligned with either the Western Bloc or the First World, or the Eastern Bloc, the Second World. Third World countries were often newly independent former colonies with economies that were primarily agrarian or resource-based. This term carried with it implications of economic underdevelopment, political instability, and social challenges. So the second one is Global South. So the term Global South emerged as a more politically correct and geographically inclusive alternative to Third World. It encompasses countries primarily located in the southern hemisphere, but also includes regions in the northern hemisphere that share similar socio-economic characteristics. The Global South concept acknowledges the historical legacies of colonialism, imperialism, and exploitation that have contributed to the economic disparities between nations. So, in summary, while both terms broadly refer to less economic developed regions of the world, Third World has a Cold War era connotation and is more associated with political alignment, while Global South is a more contemporary and inclusive term that emphasizes shared experience of economic and social challenges across various regions. So, both terms are used to describe countries facing similar socio-economic challenges. Third world carries historical baggage and oversimplification, whereas Global South is a more inclusive and nuanced term that acknowledges the diverse experiences and identities of countries in the southern hemisphere.
Cortez, and my topic was all about what is the difference between Third World and Global South. So the term Third World originated during the Cold War and was used to describe countries that did not align with either NATO or communist bloc. So it's now considered outdated and can be seen as pejorative. So the South Global is not a widely recognized term. However, we may interpret it as referring to countries in the southern hemisphere. These could include both developed and developing nations. For example, Australia and New Zealand are in the south hemisphere but are economically developed. In contrast, countries like South Africa or some South American nations may face economic challenge. So it's crucial to use more current and respectful terms like developing or low income. So countries, when discussing global disparities, to avoid negative connotation associated with the term Third World. So
Good day everyone. My topic is about Global South versus Third World. So, Global South, the first is economic focus. It's a term that primarily focuses on economic disparities and development challenges. It refers to countries primarily located in the southern hemisphere that tend to have lower levels of economic development, limited access resources, and face various development issues. So for the third world, first is a historical context. Originated during the Cold War and was initially a political classification based on countries' alignment with either the capitalized first world or the communist second world. It did not necessarily reflect economic development, but was more about political alignment. So the second mode of Global South is a modern and inclusive. It is a more modern and inclusive term, emphasizing the need for global cooperation and addressing the economic and social challenges faced by countries in the region. So it acknowledges the diversity within these countries and does not carry the same negative connotation as third world. So the third world is second is outdated and pejorative. This term has fallen of favor in contemporary discourse and is considered outdated and somewhat pejorative by some. It's rarely used in academic or policy discussion today. So, a new concept of global relations emerged from the experiences of Latin American countries. So the first is economic sovereignty. So the second is political sovereignty, regional integration, diplomacy and multilateralism, South-South cooperation, human rights and social inclusion, and also cultural diplomacy. Thank you. Global South and Third World are terms often used to interchangeable to describe region facing socio-economic challenges, but they have subtle differences. So, Global South is a more contemporary and politically correct term, encompassing countries like in Africa, Latin America, and all countries in Asia. So, emphasizing shared development of gold. So, the Third World developed historically coined during the Cold War refers to economically disadvantaged nations, but its usage has diminished due to its negative connotation, while Global South emphasizes a broader perspective on development and collaboration. Like the terms of Global South and the Third World are both used to describe region facing socioeconomic challenges, and while they share similarities and they hold distinct implications. So understanding the importance lies in acknowledging the evolving nature of language and addressing global disparities. So Global South emphasizes a more inclusive and contemporary approach, like fostering collaboration and recognizing shared development of goals. So, whereas the Third World carries historical baggage and negative connotation, making the former term more relevant for fostering a positive and cooperative global discourse on development. So, an example of Global South and the Third World is the way we refer to countries like India, will historically labeled as part of the Third World. So the term of Global South now better captures its growing economic influence, technological advancement, and collaborative efforts in addressing global challenges. So this shift reflects a more nuanced and forward-looking perspective on development and international relations. So, will the Global South and the Third World kana historical use are interchangeable but with subtle distinction. So the Global South is refers to economically and socially disadvantaged regions, and often located in Africa, Latin America, and parts of the Asia. And it emphasized the geopolitical and economic disparities between more developed northern hemisphere countries and less developed southern hemisphere countries. So on the other hand, third world originally denoted countries aligned with either NATO, first world of the communist bloc. So second world during the Cold War. Over time, it has evolved to describe economically disadvantaged nation. While the terms share similarities, Global South is a more contemporary and inclusive expression and emphasizes global economic inequality without the Cold War era connotation and associated with third world.
New conception of global relations emerged from the experiences of Latin American countries. There are six Latin American countries, which is economic sovereignty, political sovereignty, regional integration, diplomacy and materialism, South-to-South cooperation, human rights, and social inclusion. First is economic sovereignty. Economic sovereignty is a Latin American countries having faced economic exploitation and dependency have pushed for greater economic sovereignty. They have sought control over their natural resources and economic policies, often through nationalizations and resource management. Next is political sovereignty. Political sovereignty is experiences of political interface and intervention have led Latin American nations to emphasize political sovereignty. They advocate for non-interface in their internal affairs and promote the principle of self-determination and autonomy. Next is regional integration. Regional integration is a Latin American countries have pursued regional integration initiative like Mercosur and the Pacific Alliance. This effort signify a shift towards collective bargaining and regional cooperation to global relation. Next is diplomacy and multilateralism. Multilateralism is a Latin countries have actively engaged in diplomacy and embraced multilateralism. They have been involved in international organizations such as the UN and the OAS and have advocated for reforms to make this institution more inclusive and responsive to developing countries' needs. Next is South-to-South cooperation. South-to-South cooperation is a Latin American nations have looked to other countries in the global South for cooperation. This shift reflects a desire to build alliance with nations facing similar development challenges and to reduce dependency on traditional global powers. Next is human rights and social inclusion. Human rights and social inclusion in Latin American countries have increasingly prioritized human rights and social inclusion in their foreign policy agendas. They advocate for gender equality, indigenous rights, and environment protection on the global stage. The last is cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy in the Latin American countries have leveraged their culture, heritage, and soft power asset of enhanced global influence. They promote their cultural exports, fostering international connection and a positive image.